exciting for me to be able to talk to you today as the National High Performance Director for Surfing Australia. I think our story is a really unique case right now in the system. I'm biased, obviously I'm part of the story, but I think if I actually could take my role hat off and sit as a general member of the public, I actually also would be really intrigued on the story of surfing, which is how are we actually going to take this sport to its first Olympic Games. All the different tensions and observations around bringing professional sport into a high-performance sports system. We're a great case study, so it gives me great pleasure to be able to share some insights into the story with you. Probably just as a first big point that I'd like to share with you is just a little bit more about me, because obviously how I'm showing up in this story, I needed to have some big influences. And those big influences is there's just a little photo there of me growing up in Torquay in Victoria, which is, for those of you who are here from Australia, you know is primarily a surfing capital of Australia, with all the big brands, Rip Curl, Billabong, Quicksilver, all starting their journey out of that little surfing village. And for the first 18 years of my life, I was the biggest tomboy in town, down in Torquay, and every single day was spent riding a surfboard. My younger brother and sister ended up being on the tour and competing professionally. So it's actually a sport that's part of my DNA. When I was growing up in that environment, you needed to be a little bit of a pioneer as a female surfer in that town. And I'm not going to say that that was easy. It was very difficult. And I got to a point where I didn't have the courage to continue. I looked around at the sport and thought there was limited opportunities. And I was intrinsically wired for a social environment, so team-based sports really started to attract me. And I was introduced to hockey through surfing, through school, and ended up playing the sport there, going through the whole pathway, playing for Victoria, ended up getting selected in the Australian Institute of Sport, which means that you have to go across to the national program in Perth, and ended up playing for 5 years in the Australian women's hockey team, where I was coached for a couple of years there by a face that some of you will know as one of our best coaches in the Australian high performance sports system, in Rick Charlesworth, and I was very fortunate to be under his wing for a long period of time. He taught me how to build teams and was a significant influence, and still is today. That's my father, Maury. He's not with us anymore, but he also was a high-performance athlete in the sport of surf lifesaving, and went on to win Australian and world titles paddling surf skis and then sprint canoe. And I think from him and growing up under his mentorship as a father, I learnt about the importance of excellence. So I wasn't the most talented hockey player. Hockey came very hard for me. I was more naturally gifted in surfing, but I learnt how to work really hard, and I was the hardest trainer on the team. And I think that I really learnt about what it takes to be relentless when you're undergoing the pursuit of excellence. So big influences in, I think, how I'm shaping up in the story of surfing later in my career. Got an opportunity after working with the Australian Institute of Sport and the New South Wales Institute of Sport for a long period of time to come and actually take up this role with Surfing Australia as the National High Performance Director. What attracted me to the role was that I could see that this was a sport that was on a really fast growth trajectory. And it had a really clear strategy. And it had a really unique culture, a culture that I fiercely wanted to protect in its nuance. Probably from a culture point of view, I could see it as being very similar to the Olympic Winter Institute here in Australia, so the Park and Pike program, who I'd worked with, and I could see that they were about 10 years ahead of us from a surfing perspective. Very much I was really interested in the clear strategy and the fact that the high performance program was just one element of a business that was really growing very fast. Of a sport that was, if you look at all the 65 sports in our high performance sports system, that's not necessarily including professional sports, but I could see that there was this nuance, a point of difference that I really wanted to protect in surfing. I didn't want surfing to look like rowing or swimming or sailing. I thought that it needed to be a story that the system could be really proud of about how to actually work with a sport culturally in a really different way. So you can see there are strategic pillars for the whole organisation. High performance just sits there as one department. Some of you will know that we've got a high performance centre down on the northern New South Wales coast. It's a facility, it's just one place we work, it's one daily performance environment. It just happens to be the place that the National Sporting Organisation has its head office, but I'll explain a little bit more about that later. From an organisational point of view, I was both daunted and excited by the fact that the 5 things that Surfing Australia wanted to be famous for was one of those was to have the #1 high-performance surfing program in the world. And that's scary. That's scary when you're taking on a role for the very first time in high performance. So, you know, the experience that we have in this room, I'm really mindful of some of these reflections that I'm going to share with you today. You're going to hear those as just basic 101 high performance. But think about surfing in its context as very young. It's literally only been in the high performance space for 5 years from my perspective. And those 5 years served us really, really well. And I came into the role 2 years ago, and we're ready for the next chapter now. So, you know, this task of having the #1 high performance program in the world, if we focus on that, then from my perspective, the results will take care of themselves. So this thing called the Olympics comes along for us at the end of 2016, start of 2017, where the announcement's made that we're a sport going to be included in the Olympics for the very first time, and we're going to Tokyo. To be honest, that decision really polarised our community. So Group A were very much asking the question on, does surfing need the Olympic Games? Have we sold our soul commercially by putting our hand up for this? Will we lose the essence of who we are as a sport? Do we really need it? Will our athletes engage in it? Because obviously they're doing very well on the professional tour themselves. And the world title, the annual world title, Quest, is obviously the pinnacle for them. So there was a lot of question marks from one section of the community, and there still is today. There's still some sceptics out there about whether we actually should be in the Olympic Games. Then there was the next group that was actually going, hang on, this is the greatest opportunity for our sport to grow and to showcase, you know, all of the value adds that we can bring at the largest multi-sport event in the world. And I obviously was on that side of the fence and saw the opportunity. But we had to be very, very careful, I think, about the language that we used when we first started embarking on this journey. And I was really mindful to actually really frame up that this thing called the Olympics was simply a catalyst for change. So it was respectful to that polarised community for me to come into the program and actually start to use language saying, yes, I understand this is a 2-week event in a 4-year cycle, but let's look at this as an opportunity for a significant catalyst for change. So what were some of those changes? Well, change brings opportunity, so not just for Surfing Australia, the organisation, but for surfing in Australia. And we had to be really mindful, I think, before we embarked on the journey on what's the current landscape, right? And that's obviously, you know, applies to any industry or any business. What's the landscape that we're working in? So our athletes at the elite level had not had a relationship with Surfing Australia from a high performance point of view since they had turned professional. So anyone who knows our sport well will know that there's the World Championship Tour and then the World Qualifying Series, which is an underpinning competition series that operates in an international landscape, and they're under contract. Our athletes are professional athletes under contract. So when those contracts are signed, in terms of a pathway, they had literally had to let go of Surfing Australia because we weren't doing anything for them in the high performance space. This thing called the Olympic Games comes along, and to use a crude analogy, we almost had to just jump back into bed together. So it's like, we can't go to the Olympics without our best athletes. Best athletes can't go to the Olympics without the National Sporting Organisation. So we better work out pretty quickly how we're actually going to re-establish some trust with each other and re-stitch the relationship. The ISA, the International Surfing Association, is our governing body. The qualification system for the Olympic Games, the content and the detail in that was that to be able to be selected, our athletes had to not only secure a ranking on the World Championship Tour, but they actually also had to attend the pinnacle event under the ISA banner, which is the World Surfing Games. So as part of the story, now just imagine our athletes haven't been to the World Surfing Games for some of them up to 10 years. So yes, they competed as juniors in that event, but they hadn't been back into that environment for over 10 years. So there was some fear and some trepidation about that. And a whole range of additional governance now that we're working in an Olympic environment. So Surfing Australia, we needed to change too, and I was really mindful of, we've got an opportunity here to not just reset our own charter, but to actually probably influence the system at a wider level in terms of the surfing system. So there's a multitude of stakeholders in our system. Overlay the top of all of this, all of our brands, our surf industry brands, the Rip Curls, the Billabongs, the Quicksilvers, who are all heavy investors in high performance in our sport. There was a lot of confusion from my perspective about role clarity there and a lot of duplication of resources. So whilst they're selling board shorts and T-shirts, yes, they're actually, because of the fact that they're sponsoring our athletes, the performance of the athlete is actually how they get exposure, and so they were actually investing in high performance, and there was a massive duplication of resources. So I'm looking at this going, we're all working very hard. There's a massive amount of investment, but we're not aligned in how we're working as a system. The Australian Olympic Committee adds a whole other layer of governance and requirements for us that, from an education point of view, was really complex. So we had to get in, dive in deep and work really hard very, very quickly. Resetting the compass, this is just a framework that I share with you that I had a lot of exposure to and a lot of success with in some of the corporate work that I did before I came back to sport, where I was working with leaders and building high performance cultures and strategy. And it's just a simple contextual framework that I used to reset the compass for our high performance program. And I couldn't have done this without the help of the AIS, where we actually facilitated across the landscape a whole heap of conversations to just get some data on, okay, if we do want to all be clear and aligned here as a system, then what's our clear purpose? What's the vision? What's the culture? How do we want to be perceived? Who are our business model stakeholders? And under strategy, what are we doing in daily performance environment? What systems and processes, a la Smarter Base, are we using or we're not using? In coaching, what are we doing? In research and innovation, what are we doing? In coaching, what are we doing? Leadership and culture, and camps and competition. So a whole heap of operational planning needed to happen in that growth strategy section. Who are our people? Is the piece around the bubble of succession there? And what roles and responsibilities will we actually give them in order to deliver all of those higher layers of context? So where we landed was, after a lot of discussion and a lot of debate, is that we jump out of bed every single morning as our clear purpose, regardless of your role, and what we're doing is we're supporting our Australian athletes to become the world's best surfers and people. The word that I'm most proud of in that statement is the word "and". I'm sure with the experience that we have in the room, and some of the sports who are here specifically, is there's been a hell of a lot of focus in our system around just medal targets. And I can proudly say that the "and people" part for our sport in surfing is actually where we're really driving, because my fundamental belief is if you focus on that, then the results will almost take care of themselves. The vision is, well, how will we know that purpose has come to life when we see it? Well, we better be inspiring Australians, realising dreams, celebrating success and doing it with character and courage. Hand on heart, I can tell you that the characters that we have as athletes in our sport are all leading with character and courage. Their stories are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I'm really incredibly proud of them for that. This is where I'm going to lead now around, can you build a high-performance culture in the context of team in an individual sport, is I was really mindful of language. Okay, we all know that language is incredibly important, and when you start talking about behaviours and actions to bring all of this to life from a culture point of view, I was really very consciously aware that words are just words on a page unless you provide experiences to bring those words to life so that you can give athletes, coaches, stakeholders in the system a tangible experience of, okay, now I understand what those words feel like. So I'll share with you some of the simple things that we've done that have been really critically important to be able to build a performance-focused culture. So remember now, going back to the start of the story, is that I was really observing that there were not performance-based decisions being made necessarily in our sport because of all these different agendas of our multiple stakeholders, the brands fundamentally. So a performance-based decision for me is if an athlete has a performance plan and they're doing a strength block that is in their plan, what was happening was that a brand might come in to that strength block and say, actually, we have to peel that athlete out of there because there's waves pumping in Fiji and we've got a catalogue to go and shoot and the sun's going to be up on Wednesday, so forget the strength block plan, we're heading over to Fiji. So different agendas were playing out and it wasn't a performance-focused culture in any way, shape or form. So we're getting there with that. Athlete-led, fully integrated coach performance support teams working on campaigns. It is an individual sport. They have individual campaigns. But they had no understanding of what it was like to actually have an integrated performance team working, which you guys are all obviously experienced in, and to have an athlete leading that. So now understand from a landscape point of view, our coaches are technical and tactical coaches at this point. So the history of our sport is that because it's a lifestyle sport, that coaches have actually turned up into coaching roles, yes, because they're passionate about coaching and they're highly skilled in that, but the lifestyle is so attractive that they were all very fast transitioned from athlete to coach stories. And our head coach at the Olympic Games in Bede Durbridge is a classic example of that. So he retired after 13 years on the tour in December of 2017 at Pipeline, and he started with us in our team 3 weeks later in January of 2018. So really fast transitions where the smart thing to be thinking about would be, do they have the skill set? Are they ready? What's our athlete transition programs looking like in order to get them fit for purpose for a role like that? There was no time for any of that in the sport of surfing. So we've got a lot of coaches working in the system who are now travelling the world, still on tour, doing exactly what they were doing when they were athletes, but playing coaching roles. And so our coach capability, if you had to actually just sit from a balcony and observe down, is what I would consider, compared to other best practice sports in the system, is still fairly low. And I say that respectfully. I absolutely say that respectfully. They're technical and tactical coaches who don't have a view yet of the holistic athlete. So we've got athletes who are quite mature at the Olympic Games level in terms of their age profile who are actually leading their campaigns. And I love that as a philosophy because I think it links beautifully to what we're doing now in athlete wellbeing and engagement around building those fundamental skills that allow them to confidently lead their own teams. And they're skills that they will take to life after sport in whatever roles they play. So really quite strategic and quite purposeful in the language of athlete-led integrated coach performance support teams. A fully integrated network. So we have 75 athletes who are nationally identified under the athlete categorisation list. If you consider that they've all got individual strength and conditioning providers, psych providers, nutritionists, management, coaches, there's over 500 stakeholders there easily. So how do we actually fully integrate that national network is the challenge, and obviously platforms like AMS are really going to start to help build that unity in that network. And values-based, which is obviously picking up the 3 values organisationally, but what does that mean to our high performance team? What do we look like when we're talking about real, respectful and progressive? I had to be really mindful of my own alignment with these values, and I think it acted as a real catalyst for me to actually have the courage to take up the role, because I felt very connected to these 3 values, because I knew that I could be really authentic in how I showed up. I was obviously in just how I show up in any role is that I was relationship based, and I knew that relationships were going to be critical in restitching that World Championship Tour athlete / Surfing Australia relationship back again. Respectful is actually acknowledging the history. So we've had enormous success in our sport, but our sport has changed. So the Mick Fannings and the Joel Parkinsons and these amazing athletes and the Lane Beachleys that have brought so much attention and profile to our sport is how they actually have executed their technical and tactical expertise in the field to win as many world titles as they have, is the athlete profile has actually changed. As if anyone knows our sport, it's all about aerial surfing now. So, you know, in Australia, we would fundamentally grow up learning how to surf on right-hand point beach breaks, and power-based surfing was where we've had our success. The physical and technical competencies now of athletes who are going to do well on the tour has changed from those days, so we needed to change. I was really mindful that couldn't do it alone, so that's not to get into the detail of an org chart, but that's just to show you that we were really mindful that if we are to lead with those values, and we did want to actually re-engage the athletes the way we have, that the who's on the team was absolutely critical. So we've got some scale now in our team, and it was really important for me to make sure that we had the right people in the right roles. Bede Durbridge, for those that know surfing, was the critical person that we needed in our program because he brought the relationships. So Kim Craig could ring any athlete on the tour, yes, permission to do so, but would that, in the first 3 months, would that phone have been picked up? Possibly not. But with Bede, absolutely 100% it would be, and the respect that he's held with in our community has been a massive catalyst. So he's incredibly excited to take this team to the Olympics. This photo is one that I share with you that was really important. So I started in September 2017 in the role. In January 2018, we ran our first Olympic readiness camp where we invited the athletes for the very first time to all be in a room together. Now, you might think that sounds easy. It wasn't, because they are friends on tour. Yes, they are friends, but they are also rivals. So I'm sharing with you some insight here that there was a lot of fear and trepidation about being in a room together. And we need to make sure that from a psychological point of view that we actually set it up to be a really safe environment. And look, Lane is our chair, but she's also a 7-time world champion, so it was really important for her to kick off this campaign. And the fear and trepidation part was really hard for me to understand, especially from being from a team-based sport. But I've had to really be patient, I've had to be really resilient, and I've had to really be respectful about the relationships amongst the group. What we did do that I think has made a massive, significant difference, and this is a photo again from that camp, was that we brought in a whole heap of Olympic mentors. And similar to what Rosie's doing now with the gold medal program and putting these amazing athletes back out into the system to tell their stories, is we recognised pretty quickly in January of last year that unless we start telling some Olympic story here and start to plant seeds and Olympic dreams, then surfing only knows surfing. So it's almost like they didn't know what they didn't know, and still to this case, that's still part of the story. It'll never be this hard again. So Paris 2024, a chapter will be written, but the pioneer work that we're doing now is we're leading them down a path that they've never been before. So we were really mindful of making sure that we brought some really successful, and in some cases some athletes that haven't been as successful, that have where their dreams haven't been realised. So we want to be able to introduce all of those relationships to our athletes, and I'm sure you recognise there. Mick had retired. He's obviously a 4-time world champion. He's what I call our cultural ambassador in the group. Lane's obviously very connected, not just in her chair role, but just being in amongst the group all the time. And Kathy Freeman sitting there was probably the most powerful moment for me in having her just embed in our team for a whole day and sit vulnerably with us and start to talk some stories and actually unpack the athletes' reflections of the Olympic Games for where they were at there and then. And those stories are actually now what are being picked up in the media. So let me just share with you a little video if I can.
This is a story of a little 10-year-old girl who was right there in the stands when Kathy won gold.
Kathy lifting, takes the lead. This is a famous victory.
It was a moment that affected her so much it would become her dream too.
Standing on the shoulders of giants, they were so strong.
It didn't matter what sport, soccer, footy, track, she tried them all. But then she hit the waves every day.
I see something I could do.
Next thing, she won the World Championship.
This is our time, we're just living.
But she never forgot her Olympic dream. It started a lifetime ago with a little kid in Sydney. Now, that dream is Tokyo 2020. That kid is me.
'Cause this is our time.
I'm sure most of you know Sal, but to have that story, a story that she's been sitting on since she was an 8-year-old little girl, be told in front of Kathy in that room for the very first time. Kathy herself was an emotional wreck, and you know their connection now is a real one. And Kathy, I'm sure, will be standing on the beach watching Sal in Tokyo in July. So really, really pretty special stuff. This is one of our first camps, so just images of being really mindful to facilitate a safe environment, which gave the athletes permission to actually choose when they wanted to lean in or when they wanted to lean out. And it needed to be fun. So, you know, down the bottom there is, Nam and Deb, who are our lead physical prep providers in the sport, you know, doing some sumo wrestling as a way of just, you know, doing some movement training. Now, that's not training, obviously, but it was just learning at that point how to actually engage and be with each other, how to actually safely do medical screenings and things together, how to actually, you know, sit and do a whole heap of workshop sort of conversations around where we wanted to head together. So the athletes actually had some input to the design then of our strategy. And again, just now I'm being mindful of how do you actually re-establish trust and get some buy-in is you have to take people with you. And this was quite strategic, but very purposeful, and I can proudly say we're getting some really strong rubber on the road as a result of doing it this way. 4 months later, we were ready to step it up a notch, and that was actually how do we not just sit in a conference room together and sit safely with each other, but how do we actually be in a daily performance environment together? So the culture of what I tried to set up around our sport for you, give you a picture of at the start there was our sport is set up in silos. It had been working in silos because of the fact of the nature that, you know, it's highly competitive, prize money's high, sponsorship portfolios are something that they also compete against. It was a competitive silo environment, and even our coaches who were working in the system weren't sharing any information together. So this image of actually being over at Surf Ranch, which is the Kelly Slater wave pool, 3 hours inland from LA airport, was an amazing opportunity for us, not just to experience the innovation of the technology, which is the biggest positive disruptor, I think, that our sport will ever see. Wave pool technology is coming in and it's now a multi-billion-dollar business, and this is the future of our sport in some regards. But from a daily performance environment point of view, what it actually allowed us was there were 8-foot fences all around the facility. We had full access to it for a week, and the privacy just to be able to learn how to work together. So we were big on if the athlete came, the individual coach had to come, the board shaper had to come. We put our whole high performance program support team around them, which they'd never really worked with a full team before. They'd worked with individual psychs, but it was a one-on-one conversation, never collectively as a group. So we had strength and conditioning, we had recovery, we had all the sports science expertise sitting there in that environment. And let me just share with you a little bit of a video around that.
I hear about stories of other people coming to the ranch and they get maybe 3 waves in a session, so to have 3 days here, it's so surreal, and yeah, we're very, very lucky.
But to actually come here with Surfing Australia as a camp and to have coaches, shapers, fitness people, just everyone around us here to make sure that we're monitoring how we feel, making sure that we're staying on top of things and just being aware of what's going on. It's incredible knowledge to have.
Oh, it's been insane, you know, filming right there on the back of the ski. Surfer finishes their ride, they slide up, watch the footage, go through it, see what they want to change, what they want to work on. Then 4 minutes later, boom, back on the wave again. And that's why I've lost my voice. I've been yelling and screaming and yahooing at everyone. Can't believe we've got this opportunity for the Australian surfers to really progress.
I guess that's the beauty of the wave pool. There's a lot of repetition and a lot of trial and error and so many opportunities to pretty much do whatever you want. It's just like a blank canvas.
Got here yesterday at 2 in the afternoon, and by 3 in the afternoon I'd tried 3 different boards and worked out what works and what didn't and why. It's going to accelerate the level of surfing so quickly. As soon as everyone can get the chance to come here, try boards, try moves, it's going to be incredible to watch how quickly it accelerates.
Probably 24 hours ago, I thought we might have hit a ceiling of where these guys had got to. It was a ceiling I was very happy with as their coaches, but then we just blew it out of the water. Been doing this a while and I've learned a ton in the last 3 days, and that's without even getting on to what I know the athletes I look after have learnt as well.
The whole purpose is to build the world's best surfers and make them better people. So that's through facilitating breathing regimes, stretching regimes, obviously looking at the psychology behind all this too, and then allowing that to just be transferred into the wave pool, and the skill levels just jumped astronomically.
The Olympics are a new area for professional surfing, so to have the support of the AIS is incredible, and we're already seeing what wonderful opportunities we're getting from that support, and if we want to bring home the gold medals, that's what you need.
Fantastic program Bede's put together with having the contest at the end of each session for everybody. Puts them a little bit in a frame of mind of a contest, and then they've just got to go and put together what they've learnt and what we've worked on throughout that last session. And you know, these guys are the best in the world. Put a jersey on, their mindset changes and they want to win.
Performance directors across all our Olympic sports probably are presented with the same complex challenge, and that challenge is the efficiency of time. There's 762 days until Tokyo as of today. You know, in our sport surfing, time is actually probably the biggest barrier that we have. I don't know of another training environment where we could have achieved the amount of gains that we have than here at Surf Ranch. So that was a daily performance environment. Significantly from a culture point of view, that was a game changer that week. And it allowed us to really connect around, okay, Team Australia, the brand, what do we want to show up like in competition environments with each other. And this is another example of what it looks like now in competition. This was our recent ISA World Surfing Games, which, as I mentioned earlier before, is now a qualification event for our athletes. These images wouldn't happen on the World Championship Tour under the WSL banner. You would not see Steph Gilmore and Sally Fitzgibbons standing on the shore break under a national flag together in that space. Now, rightly or wrongly, it's not yet. But the World Surfing Games allowed us to actually bring that vision to life. And, just even the image there of the flags, the 55 nations, the 250 athletes that competed in that event, to actually see our 3 guys and 3 girls, athletes at the profile like Julian Wilson and Owen Wright, Ryan Callanan, Stefan Sell and Nikki Van Dyke, have a aha moment of, oh wow, this sport that we're in is way bigger than just us, was really critical moment. So we started obviously just under the whole Team Australia banner there, really again moving at a much faster rate toward how we're actually going to show up together in the Tokyo environment. This image for me was a really special one. Nikki and Sal were in back-to-back heats, and to actually see them stand again on the shoreline, simple stuff, but sharing information on tides and water movement and hey, I think the left's better than the right, and actually support each other in that way. Again, the World Surf League environment doesn't allow that. So under the Team Australia flag now, we're actually starting to build a high-performance team culture in an individual sport, which interestingly is translating into the World Surf League campaigns. We won the Aloha Cup, which is a team event, and it was a really special moment for us. That image is now beamed out to all of our talent athletes. So we all work in sport. You know that you can't buy this kind of stuff, where now our under 16 and our under 14 and under 12, nationally identified talented athletes want to be at the Team Australia events to be able to experience something as crazy as that. 10 seconds, one of the most powerful things that I can have as a high performance director now started to be communicated to our sport. Again, in the daily performance environment, that integrated national performance teams, the image that we have down there at the bottom, there's media training happening there, there's competition simulation, there's judging expertise that's being shared, there's performance psychology working there in that image, getting athletes ready to go out and do simulated heats, there's coaching, there's performance analysis. So creating environments where all of the expertise can work safely together and obviously start to collect data, meaningful data, is our athletes hadn't worked in this way. So back to my point, this is basic 101 high performance, but in a sport like surfing, it's pretty revolutionary. And I want you to just see there, just from a relationship point of view, it's our staff working who are really highly skilled at building trust and building relationships, and they bring a hell of a lot of energy. And they get up out of bed every single morning to support these guys. This is where it's translating to the World Surf League. So again, when Sal won her event in Rio this year in Brazil, just the fact that Wade Carmichael's there waiting for her on the beach and carrying her up the beach, again, that hadn't happened. So you think that this is simple stuff, but this is again just images that start to reshape the culture of the sport around it is actually safe, guys, to be in a high-performance team culture. We went to Japan a couple of months ago to actually take the athletes into the Olympic environment for the first time, went into the local schools, went into the community, did some beach cleanups with the locals, and again, just these images show on the faces of our 4 athletes who we took to this. There was actually 6, there's 4 in that photo. That they were getting some real perspective of this thing called the Olympic Games is actually way bigger than just the performance in itself. Really, really important. So can you build a high-performance team culture in an individual sport? I'm 100% of the belief that yes, you can. We are team, end of story, but it's not end of story. I am fully aware that we're just literally one chapter in. And yeah, thank you for listening. But yeah, it's been exciting to be able to share the surfing story with you. So thank you.